My name is David Wilkin from the Birmingham School of the Built Environment.
My name is Katharine Maitland and I'm from CTN, which is Computing, Telecommunications and Network.
It's interesting that Steve Harding talked about cross-innovation, because this is actually a cross-discipline study looking at the potential skills coming in from CTN and data analysis, and then looking at sort of the particular built environment field that I work in. There's a concept of building information modelling, or BIM, which is currently very high on the government agenda in terms of managing buildings and built environment assets. And BIM embeds a lot of data, sort of product data, and the different components that go into buildings. And this is all represented in a 3D dimensional model, and they can be used for effective management through a project life cycle from the earliest stages through to operation. It's the latter stages that are particularly interesting. It's the facilities management side that's got a lot of interest, because potentially that's where a large percentage of costs associated with buildings reside. Government agenda has been quite strong in this particular field, so it's looking at operational efficiency of their built assets and the power of the data that sits behind those assets, and looking to bring in efficiencies to the maintenance and the operation and energy management of those assets. So it's sort of encompassing a lot of different areas, and it's a newish field in terms of the way in which we look at the built environment. So just looking at sort of some references, one aspect of facilities management in terms of operational capability, looking at things like capacity and the size, availability of the facilities, the ability to change, so the flexibility associated with the buildings that we use. How they're able to adapt to new ways in which our future community of students and researchers will operate within buildings. The ability to accommodate also variety within a single building, so dealing with sort of commercial opportunities in terms of renting out spaces, but also in terms of the way in which we teach and so on, so different types of usages of building. Quite a marked transition from the way in which we normally visualize buildings, which is very standardized and very sort of, I suppose, block type use of space. Also looking at contingency provisions, so making what-if arrangements for responses to unexpected events. So we live in quite a dynamic environment, particularly in a university environment, and suddenly we do face, potentially with the start of an academic year, we might face a particular surge in certain types of interest in some of our courses. And how do we deal with the contingency, that kind of contingency in terms of responding in the facility, the actual building responding better to those kind of scenarios. There's also a lot of data, the operational performance of the building, so monitoring the facility impacts, both positive and negative on people and their operations, so on students, on staff, on researchers, and how the building actually operates and how effectively it operates in meeting the needs of all of those. And operational effectiveness as well, so evaluating the effect of the facilities and services on work. So you only need to be a resident in the Millennium Point building to see how it doesn't work when you compare it to perhaps the Parkside story, and sort of where a newer facility is much more responsive to the people that use the building.
But coming from my side, I'm very much a systems engineer, but I'm also a data analyst. So I came in and they said, oh, there's this BIM model. And I thought they were meaning my business intelligence modelling and not the building information model. And so we had these two BIMs. Now, coming from my side as a systems person, then I wanted to look at, the stakeholders, who was involved in running this building, or who designed it, who were involved, who were making these decisions. And from that side, David hadn't actually looked at the stakeholder analysis. He'd only looked at it from his perspective. And suddenly we're getting two sides of the story. we're discovering many more as we're going along. I also brought into our research this social technical modelling, rich pictures, and that enables you to look at and investigate the system from a variety of perspectives, and you look at it from each stakeholder perspective. That enables you to make this multi-viewpoint analysis. What's important? And that's where we really are at the moment, is we're actually starting to talk to a variety of people, and we're gaining lots and lots of information, because did you realise that when they design buildings, they design them for maximum capacity and not for what we're getting? If you look at the occupancy of some rooms, sometimes you've got, say, I don't know, a 60-seater lab with about 10 people in it, but it was designed to have it filled to a capacity. So then if you look at the sensor detail, they were assuming that it would be used all the time with all these people in, generating lots of heat, and that's not the case. And with Parkside, it's got all the sensors in place, so we're hoping to get some of that data to actually look at what occupancy, the impact of occupancy on that design, and whether eventually we can look at how it can influence architecture in the future. Another one that we looked at from my side is data flow modelling. So looking at the data which is flowing around the building systems. And again, they've looked at the sensors, but never looked at how it's flowing around. And this is theory coming from the database side. And finally, my own field of data analytics. I run the SAS Student Academy. And so looking and analysing data is my field. But looking at it in a context and looking at it from different perspectives that I didn't know actually existed within the built environment. So we're coming together. So cross-discipline, talk about innovation. The only thing we had in common initially was we shared a building.
Yes.
Yes. But now, the two of us coming together, we're putting the two modelling systems together to give a new BIM.
Yeah, and it's large amounts of data from those different systems. So we all know the acronyms of different systems that we use in the university, so CellCAT, SAMS, and others. We've got access control systems. And then from my environment, it's BMS, Building Management Systems. So there's loads of data from lots of different sources, in lots of different formats, and distributed across lots of different platforms. But it's finding a common way to interrogate that. So I'm able to provide the building interpretation of some of that data, and Kathy is able to crunch the numbers.
That's right, and it's been really interesting. What even with the small amount of data which we've been given, there's some patterns, and this is what's exciting. But the facilities management, I didn't realise how much this sector brings into the country, brings into. If you take the university, you know how much we spend on electricity and. Get the right electricity, gas, water, and aircon.
Yeah.
Chill.
So the chill factor.
Chill.
So there's loads of different systems, and at the extreme case, you get a situation which was referred to in a conversation not long ago with someone at the Birmingham airport who's called Kilowatt Ken, and he goes around switching things on and off to try and manage the costs associated with the systems that run within buildings. Now, if you can start doing some more intelligent analysis of the information that sits behind there, you will know precisely when to change and switch on and switch off certain systems, and you'll have a much more effective utilization of what your building actually has in terms of all the different services, because it's immensely complicated, particularly in big buildings. There's sort of the capability as well to look at continuously improving the services, so responding to user input. So the post-occupancy evaluations that get done on new buildings now look at providing a lot more data back as to how that building's operating in terms of student feedback, in terms of the users of the facility. And the cost savings is where there's got to be a lot more research in terms of how we can actually manage the buildings. We all know engineers over-design to compensate for the fact that they may end up with liabilities associated with systems that don't perform very well. So how can we sensibly, within a certain parameters, make decisions that will allow for better operation of buildings? So the client, as in the university, should be making those decisions rather than engineers just covering their professional indemnity insurance as such. So energy efficient smart buildings, so the sensor data, there's lots of different data sources for that, I've mentioned already, and being able to anticipate information for the future building management. So responding to the changes in our student cohorts, responding to the changes in uses, responding to new research initiatives where we have to have different types of spaces represented within the built fabric within a building. So it's this BIM versus BIM, and in effect we come up with BIM-I squared, which is the intelligence as such, and using it from two sources, using it from the built environment source, but using it also from the data and analytics side of things.
So some initial results. We've only had a small amount of data given us, and we keep on pleading for a bit more, please. But if you look at the top graph, it was a case of when I saw this data, it was, oh, where did that come from? What's that big spike? And even more interesting, what's those two little ones? It was interesting when it went back to people that they sort of like, we don't know either. I think it's a month's supply of data which has been put in one section. So we actually did remove that. But the other two were quite interesting. We haven't had a result yet from those. I think it's when they whacked up the heating on full blast to test the system. The little lumps that you've got, again, something I didn't know, is when they actually turn the heating off, etc., on a Sunday. And we'd like to see whether, if they didn't turn it off, would we actually get a more constant heat, or the impact of turning it off on a Sunday? Is it saving the money or not? We'd like to experiment on that. So that's what that first one did. When we actually looked in a lot more detail, which having the data for each day means that we could actually look at the scatter plot, and we could actually see that actually there was more variation within the day than we expected. They'd only looked at this in numbers, and they didn't even look at the sort of graph that we did the first one. But when you look in more detail, there's far more fluctuation. And we wondered why, because I would have expected it to be more continuous. When you're looking at electricity usage throughout the day, why is it so scattered? The next one is chill, which is the aircon. Again, we've got that blip over September. We don't know what caused that. But the rest of the time, it was quite interesting. Where you've got the little dots on the bottom is where they've turned it off. So when you're roasting, you now know they actually turn it off. But actually, when you look in detail, it was every Sunday again. Here we go again. But again, it was pretty static, which to me again is surprised, because you imagine in the hot weather, it would have gone up. And that didn't show that. So something's not quite right. This is Parkside building, so hence their story. When you looked at the histogram of it, then you can see that continual level. And again, why? So we've started analysing the data, and we've come out with more questions. But that's where you expect to be at the beginning of a research project.
Yeah, and it's looking forward to actually getting more data and being able to provide more analysis of that data, and then putting on different hats in terms of the building services engineers and analysing that and coming up with solutions to manage the university estate.
Yes, I mean, from the data side, I would like to see if we could develop some method of measuring the agility of a building from the facilities management side. Because when you look at Millennium Point, it's, I don't know, I describe it like Hogwarts, where the walls changed, not the stairs. But it must impact on the facilities management, because it's not how it was designed. Parkside, we're discovering, is a more rigid structure, and they're not going to be able to change it so much. So can we develop between us a method of measuring the agility, the potential for a building to change to meet the needs of the organisation? Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, David and Katharine. Are there any questions before we move on to the final presenter?
Frustration around trying to speak two different languages that have the same name attached to them.
Initially it was from me because I didn't realise he was talking about something different. But then when you work with somebody from another discipline, you have to agree on a shared terminology, and that's what we've been building.
It's worked quite well. It's I suppose we're starting to communicate in the right sort of ways. We know where we're heading to in terms of the data analysis.